If you're brand new to Adobe programs for graphic design, this is going to be a walkthrough for you. It's going to go over the basic tools that you're going to use, what the windows look like in each of the programs, and showing what's similar and different about each of the three programs highlighted here: Photoshop, InDesign, and Illustrator. So if you were to open each one of them and stack them next to each other, you'll see that this kind of opening screen, this opening window that they each have is really similar. Basically, you can open a file or create a new file, and then it has these different types of folders. So there's this deleted folder that you might wind up needing. There's shared with you. There's your files. Starting to use Firefly with which is AI. Each one is going to have some different features. It'll probably show you your recent files, and it might be shown as a list or as a grid, and you can switch between those. Let's start with Photoshop. Photoshop, you're going to go to a new file and you get a pop-up window. You can name your file, test file. So here's one of the first things to know. When we're working with files, don't use spaces. Always use a dash. The reason why, so many of our files wind up on the internet, and the internet makes a space %20 and it just clutters all of our work. So just use dashes if that helps with keyword optimization in your file names. Good practice. I also typically use all lowercase. So you would say test file, all lowercase it, use a dash. All right, so in all of our design programs, we have a unit of measurement, and this is under width or height. So in Photoshop, I have pixels. Pixels is a dot, so that's a screen measurement. Inches, we all know inches from our rulers from elementary school, that's a print measurement. Then we have metrics and centimeters and millimeters. Points and picas have more to do with measurements around text and columns. So the ones you're going to use primarily in the US is going to be pixels for your screen work and inches for your print work. Now, you will make the mistake where you type something in, 11 for a letter size piece of paper, and you type in 8.5, and you're not going to notice that it is pixels. So you might need to double check your sizes, or if everything is looking really blurry and you can't zoom in enough, you've probably done pixels and not inches. So keep that in mind. Then you're going to have your color mode. So Photoshop can be for on-screen design, which is RGB, and for print design, which is CMYK. So you will need to set this correctly when you're working. Many of the filters and edits that you can do in Photoshop require RGB color. So I always recommend starting with RGB and then converting if you know it's going to print. Also, a lot of our images are for screens, and if you do have it as CMYK, you'll get kind of some brilliant, bright colors that are unexpected. So set to RGB to start with. All right, so we'll say, switch this back to inches. You can see here that it's well less than a tenth when I have it as pixels, a tenth of an inch. So that is why you'll be zooming in and it still looks super blurry and small because pixels are very small. All right, so when we say okay, we're going to get an image. In all of our programs, we're going to have space. So form and space is what creates design. Form is all of the things, all of the stuff, and space is what is around it, right? What is containing it. So in this case, this letter size 8.5 by 11 is my space. That's my composition. And anything that I put on it is form. So that can be a shape, it can be typography, so that's letters, it can be lines, it can be image, it can be illustration. Photoshop is primarily for manipulating pixels, raster images. All right, so that means that I can open a picture and I can adjust the colors of a picture, right? The tone, the contrast, the levels. I could select certain pixels. So I could select a color range, we'll say in the reds, and then maybe I adjust those colors to be blue, right? So you can see that wasn't perfect, but you can see it's adjusting. You can see here, it's adjusting pixels. If I zoom in, as I zoom in even closer, you can see these are pixels. 1 pixel of color makes our pictures. Okay. Now, let's open a file in Illustrator. I go to New File. I get all of these different options of sizes. Traditionally, Illustrator was for print, and now it is used for all kinds of things. So you can change from CMYK to RGB in Illustrator for whatever you are designing for. And you can pick default mobile sizes, web sizes, print sizes. You can also save your most recent sizes. So I'm going to start with an orientation of landscape, 8.5 by 11. 300 DPI. It's also shown as PPI here. This is resolution that can be high quality printed. So this does default in Illustrator to 300. All right, we have our name up here. So we say test file, remember lowercase with a dash between. Click create. Okay, so we have a similar thing. We have an artboard. It's white. So that is our composition size. And this is where we would place images, lines, text, all of the stuff that goes into a design. All right, so we have our tools. Similar to if I flip back to Photoshop, here's my tools, and they look pretty similar. All right, we're going to do a similar thing in InDesign, save file, new file. This looks pretty similar, 8.5 by 11. InDesign always defaults to print, and it's 8.5 by 11. Vertical is the most common, but you can change the slots. There are options to do web, so it's not that you can't do it. Traditionally, InDesign was definitely for multi-page publication. So we're going to do test file here, say create. And again, pretty similar. I have a piece of paper, I have my tools, and this one defaulted to margins, which is great. That's helping me already think about a grid and layout with my design. All right, so you can see getting started, they all have similarities. Now, InDesign is for putting together the pieces. So InDesign is where you put in the words that your writer has written for you. It's where you drop in the finalized photos that have already been touched up in Photoshop. It's where you put in shapes and logos that came from Illustrator. It's where you compile your multi-page publication. It is not where you edit photos itself or where you make illustrations or logos. It's where you put it all together. Let's start with something vector. In my toolbar, I'm in Photoshop, and the first thing about your layouts is everybody's layouts might look a little bit different. Under Window, you can do Workspace, and there are default workspaces. If you're missing a lot of tools, it's typically because you're in the essentials. So switch to a different workspace, and you'll see different tools will show up first or different windows. So that is a quick way to kind of reset if you're missing things that you're not, that you're looking for. I can make my tools be one long bar or wide. Now, every Adobe program has this toolbar. So if we jump into Illustrator, I also have the toolbar. I can click it in, I can click it out. I also have different workspaces. And again, you're probably going to be on Essentials. and you're going to have a lot less tools or maybe not all of the bars that you want, I recommend using Essentials Classic, but you will kind of get used to the layout that you want and you can move all the windows around to fit your space. Let's go into InDesign. Same thing, we have a toolbar. It can go single column or horizontal or two column. We also have Workspace here, and you can make your own custom ones. Again, Essentials narrows things down. I really prefer Essentials Classic. All right. So another thing that's going to be similar on every toolbar is each tool, when it has more than one tool that's hidden in a flyout panel, it will have this little triangle in the bottom right. And what you have to do is hold down. And when you click and hold down, you'll get those other options. All right, so let's go into Illustrator. I can click and hold and I can see additional options come up. Now, by default, and especially when your Adobe programs update, you are going to have what they call these tooltips that are showing up. And they can be really helpful. They will tell you key commands that you can use. You can also click learn more and get a video about how to use the tool. But if you find them annoying and just in the way, you can turn those off by going into your settings. It might be called preferences if you're on a PC. You are going to go to general and unclick show rich tooltips. That's an Illustrator. Now, when I go over, it just tells me the name of my tool. It doesn't give me the pop-up. You will find similar things in each of the programs. So under InDesign preferences, it's under notifications, rich tooltips. And they're calling that enable quiet mode. And you can always use your search and your preferences to find it. Okay, the next thing to understand is that each one of the programs has a layers window. There's actually lots of windows in every program that's under window, and you can see all of them, but there's a layers in every one of the three programs that we're looking at. They all work a little bit different. So by default in Photoshop, an image that you would open, like a JPEG, has a locked background and is one layer. But in Photoshop, we can do a lot more. We can have hundreds of layers. We can folder our layers. We can add additional layers. I can unlock my layer by clicking that icon. I can also use the icon here. Okay, there's a flyout panel from the top of layers. I can say new layer, the second one. You can name your layers. In a layer, I can paint. So this is a raster painting on its own layer that I can turn on and off visibility. When you see a gray and white grid, this means transparency. I can use my type tool and I can click and I can type. I can go back to my move tool, grab from the corner and scale so you can see text. So I have a text layer, a raster layer, an image layer, and I can also add vector. So I have a square here. Whenever I click a tool in Photoshop, up at the top, there should be an options or properties area. And this is the additional details that you'll need for that tool. So I have my fill. I can set it to another color and I can make a square. So this is a vector square. And you can see that it is not an image, that it is vector because it has this little icon right here in the bottom of the layer. So everything that we do in Photoshop has its own layer. And you can see that when I select it in the layers, it's also giving me a border and selecting it in my picture and vice versa. If I select it in my picture, it's also selected in my layers panel. So that's how I know what I'm actually manipulating. Whatever's active in my layers, when I give different commands, that's what's being updated. All right, so let's jump into Illustrator and we will use our same rectangle tool. Here we have a fill and a stroke. So my fill is white and my stroke, which is a border, is black. I'm going to click the color, pick another color, say okay. All right, so this is vector. So this is like the square that was made in Photoshop. They're both vector, which means they're a geometric shape and I can manipulate them and they can be small on a business card or super large on a billboard and still be crisp. I also have a text tool just like I do in Photoshop. I can click once and type. I can click back to my move tool or my selection tool. It looks similar to Photoshop, but not exactly the same. Shift from a corner and scale. Okay, so I have text and I cannot actually make pixels. I am not manipulating pixels, but I can say file place and get images that I could place into my Illustrator document. It gives me a little thumbnail and now I can place an image. So you can just find an image from your computer to test that. Now, you should have a few things. We're going to go to Window, Layers, and we're going to look. So in Photoshop, we could see each of our items in our layers. In Illustrator, it automatically folders it. So you have to expand your layer, and now I can see each of my 3 things. Now I'm clicking just like I did in Photoshop, and I'm not seeing anything getting activated on my screen. That's because Illustrator's is a little bit different. You have to click the little circle target on that layer to actually activate it on the screen. Okay, so you can see now I'm activating it. Vice versa, if I select it here, you can see it's targeted and it even gives me a little colored square to show me that that's what I have active. If I click and drag over more than one item, you can see I have 2 active, but they're not both highlighted here. You just tell over there. So that's some of the differences. It's all foldered in one big layer unless you're manually moving things. And really, we stay in one layer in Illustrator unless our template, like our print template, we might have a locked layer or we might have cut lines so that, let's say, a sticker could be printed and then cut out. So there are some different things, but that's one difference and is how your layers work. If we go into InDesign, we can use our text tool. By default, you'll probably have one big text box, and that's because it's intended for writing a book. So it has one big text box. We could say type fill with placeholder text, and you could see it's filled up. Okay, so we have our text box. And our text box reflows text that's not stretching it. If I grab it from the corner, it isn't making my text size bigger. It's just making the box that's containing it bigger. I still have, if I hold down my ellipse, I have my rectangle, my circle, and my polygon. I can grab my rectangle. It is set to fill and stroke as none, which is why I can't see it. But I can change and even I have to click to my fill, click another color, right? So I can still make vector. This is just like the vector that we looked at for our squares in the other 2 programs. And again, Photoshop is for manipulating pixels. So in InDesign, I do file place and I also place pictures just like we did in Illustrator. Okay, so now I have 3 things similar to we did on the other ones. I'm going to go to Window, Layers, and you're going to see that this is similar to Illustrator. I have to expand it. There's still 3. I can still select by those targets, but now it's only the rectangle. It's not a target and a rectangle, right? I can go between them. This time when I select a layer, it is highlighting here, but it is not selecting over there, right? I have to actually select from this rectangle And if I grab the actual item on my page, it is changing what is selected with the blue, but this stays highlighted. So these are some of the quirks that you'll get used to as you start to work in the three programs. All right, so what we've done so far is we've shown that each program has a similar toolbar that you can place a picture, that you can add vector shapes and add text in all three programs with very similar icons, and that each one has a window layers panel that works a little bit different for how to select things. We have a top arrow or a move arrow in each program that allows us to select and move items. We know that we can create a new file pretty similar in each program. One other important tip in Photoshop is if you clicked on your move and nothing is moving like I am showing you do not have the auto select selected. So you need to make sure that is checked always. And I always like having show transform controls. If you do not see this menu, it is because you do not have the move tool selected. Remember, every tool that you select changes these options up at the top. If you don't see those options, then you need to go to Workspace, Graphic, and Web, and that will bring that up for you. Okay, so let's do a saving. I'm going to say File, Save As, and we will see, I'm going to click to my desktop. So you always want to navigate to where you're saving your files. Down at the bottom, you'll see your format. So Photoshop is the default editable file type for Photoshop. That ends in a PSD. This is the only file type that is going to keep all of your layers, all of your filters, all of the things that you need for your editable file. So that is Photoshop's proprietary photo file type, okay? PSD, so I can say save. When I go to Illustrator and I say File, Save As, it has Adobe Illustrator AI. You can see up here, .ai. That is the proprietary editable designer file for Illustrator. So that is the type of file you want so that you get all your layers and everything is editable. And when you go to InDesign, if we say File, Save As, InDesign, INDD, InDesign file, and that's the proprietary InDesign file. So you say save, okay? So that is your first overview to these three programs. I look forward to continue teaching you as we dig into more similarities and more differences and get into designing.